So we're going to wrap up our initial discussions of design terms and concepts by reviewing some additional compositional techniques and terms that I would like for you to apply both in practice and during critique, so we have the right way to talk about our words. So let's look at some other ways we can arrange our elements in principle design that satisfy artistic and functional intention. The first term here is bleed. A bleed is when the part of the image extends off of the page and it is trimmed off. So your subject is not fully on the page. Remember that just because your subject is not entirely included doesn't mean we don't know what it is. For example, I can see part of an arm to know that there is the rest of the body there. So here we have a bleed where the building is bleeding off the bottom of the page. We know that there's more out of frame here, but it is bleeding off the side here, just as we have these trees here bleeding out the top. Next is isolation, which is creating focal point by separating a subject or object from other visual information. So we've seen this picture plenty of times, right? The shipping container is isolated. There's nothing else around it. There's no objects, nothing else blue. It's really its own focal point, and it's right here. And this, of course, is totally isolated to, the only real competing information in this picture besides the pack is the Band-Aid, right? So we have this isolated information here. It's a really nice way to simplify a picture, is just to isolate the content you want us to focus on. Clustering is very similar to isolation, but you create a focal point by grouping a bunch of objects or shapes together rather than just one thing. So here you can see a cluster that spreads out to have more negative space from left to right. On the left side here, we have all of our information essentially clustered to the left top, if you will, right? And we have the negative space here on the bottom. Crop is a word luckily we are mostly all aware of, and that has to do with, again, the area within the field of view used for a picture. So cropping has to do with the fact that we are aware of what is in our viewfinder and cropping off a portion of the image. Usually it's a reconsideration of framing or how close you are or removing external information. Next is viewpoint, which is the position of the viewer. So next is viewpoint, which has to do with the position of the viewer, which can influence what the elements look like within the picture. And the position of the viewer has to do also with the viewer's interpretation of the subject. For example, if you're shooting something from above, then let's say you're shooting a child from above and the child is looking up at you. The child will be diminished in stature. They will look very small. They'll be looking up at you. It can be a very vulnerable appearance. Whereas when an image is taken at eye level, that person or object is treated as equal to you, or at least it is given to us in a way that we normally would interact with it, right? We're used to seeing the world from a particular height, and we're all around the same general height. I know that there's a range, but there's an equality when we're kind of looking at what is, eye level as opposed to from above. And then, of course, from below, pictures taken from below can be really dominating and have like a really looming type of feeling to it. So if we were taking a picture from above, although I think that these are mostly, okay, so we have from above, which is also known as bird's eye view, right? Which is when you're looking straight down, drone photography, things like that. This is a really nice one of the dancer. But things can be diminished when photographing them at a scale like that, right? And here's kind of a picture I meant about taking pictures of people from above. They can look much smaller as they look up to you. Eye level photography will look like. You can see that things are treated as a hierarchy that's even, and it's kind of how we would normally expect to see things. So you can see how views are changing depending on if it's high or low, or eye level. So let's see, and then we have viewpoint below. So here's when we have a viewpoint that's really low. You can see how this looks kind of looming. It's over everything. It can make things look much larger than they are and kind of give this like powerful stature to it. So the eye level that you shoot in is always nice to have that. So here you can see the difference between below eye level and above, and how that changes things. Okay, so here we have somebody taken from above down to below, and you can see how dwarfed the people are in this picture here, right? As opposed to when you're taken from below, they look really tall. It's also very popular in editorial photography. It's pretty popular to shoot people editorially where you are underneath them. It can make them seem really strong and severe. Usually it can elongate the body a little bit so that people don't look tubby. It's very common to be shooting from below, editorial style, right? This one, she's even from, that's not eye level, she's a little underneath. So that's a really nice way to long people out, elongate the body, shooting underneath it a little bit. It's a really nice way to accentuate the parts of the body that you would prefer to. And lastly is the rule of thirds, which is a compositional guide that states that arranging important features of an image should be near the horizontal and vertical lines that divide the image into thirds. It's a visually pleasing way to make a lovely photograph that is not centered. So we've probably seen the grid on the back of our cameras or on our cell phones that help us with this compositional guide. And it's just a nice way of making a balanced picture that's not always centered. It's nice to be near the intersections of these grid lines here or aligned with those lines. You can see a lot of the pictures. This is a really nice example of a centered photograph as opposed to using the rule of thirds. We have this nice third here on the bottom as opposed to center, and we have this here on the third on the left as opposed to the center. This is really much more successful picture. We saw these earlier in our presentation, a really great example of 2/3 of negative space in the top and 1/3 of filled space in the bottom. Here, I would say it's about 1/3 negative space in the top, 2/3 negative space here, right? And we even have a nice intersection here, or close to it, right on that right line here.